by the time you got it, you guys. All right.
Thank you.
There you are. Yeah.
There you go, the plane. It's a restaurant down. No, you have to walk. Yeah, you have to climb from the front. Watch your step. అట్లా వేసుకోవాలి.
You could sit out there. There are chairs right here if you want to sit right there.
Let's see. Oh, Srija. Really, it's nice too. పట్టుకో భయపడుతుంది అనియా ఏ అనియా ఏం ధృత్వి ఆ సౌండ్ అనియా అనియా హార్బర్ క్వీన్ ఎందుకు
my favorite vessel we talked about. We'll see some lighthouses today, a couple of old fortifications, some island communities, and maybe a little bit of wildlife while we're out there. Last trip was pretty good for wildlife, so hopefully this one is no different. And as we go by everything, we'll give you some of the history or the fun facts that I know. My name is Pete. I will be your tour guide. But that being said, guys, this tour is all about you. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to holler them out. More than happy to answer
apartments
questions. For those of you down below, you are familiar with Miranda, who's also a tour guide in addition to being a fantastic bartender. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask her those. But also, first things first, I have a question for all of you. Where's everyone joining us from today on this beautiful holiday weekend? Feel free to holler out some hometown pride. Okay. Arizona, Idaho, someone? Chicago, thank you for joining us. Wisconsin, thanks for coming. Missouri, right? Tampa, Connecticut, there we are. Oh yeah, I know we have some Ohio ones on board, and actually, every cruise this summer there has been at least one person from Ohio on each and every boat, it seems. New York and Texas, there we are. I was waiting for the Texans, the international travelers, of course, the great nation of Texas. Thank you guys. Oklahoma as well. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Portland is a great city. We're very happy to share it with you. Very happy that we can share it with you this summer. So now, as we near the end of our slip lane here, Captain Pat is going to lay on the horn. If you guys have sensitive hearing, or especially near the bow, feel free to cover up those ears. There we go. So that was one long blast of the Islanders' horn, which is letting everyone out in the bay know that we are coming out to play. Poor folks that live in these condominiums off the right-hand side must get sick and tired of my voice. So we have just pulled out into the Fore River. That is spelled F-O-R-E, or Forward River, because it's just forward of the city of Portland. Fore River is a brackish body of water right here, so part salt, part fresh. But due to our proximity to the harbor in the North Atlantic, it is primarily salt water here. And off to the left stretches the Portland City Skyline. Quite pretty, quite short. I always like taking this moment to kind of look at the city skyline from the water. Have you guys noticed anything else about the city of Portland as you've been wandering around or seeing it from the water here? Perhaps our favorite building material over there? Red brick, indeed. There's actually a very good reason for that. It's an attempt to become fireproof. See, Portland has had a terrible history with fire. We haven't just burned down once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 separate times in our city's history. The last time it happened was the first. It was the 4th of July, 1866. A couple little kids got a little excited playing with fireworks in the boathouse down on Commercial Street. Well, they accidentally started a fire. The winds were just right and swept up the ice across the entire central section of the city. But in a matter of hours, 10,000 folks were left homeless. 1,800 buildings lay burned to the ground. At that time, we had learned our lesson. And when we rose from the ashes yet again, we rebuilt out of all red brick and stone. And that's worked out very well for us, because this past 4th of July, we just celebrated 155 years of not burning down, which is a new high score for us. We're very proud of it. And aim for 156 next year. Now, off to the left-hand side, a very important part of our working water. There's some red, white, and black ferry boats over there at the bottom of the glass building. That is the Castle Bay ferry lines terminal. Those vessels are very important service for our communities out here. Now, if you're wondering how people get to and from their homes out on these islands, we're going to see how vehicles get out there, how mail gets out there, freight, Amazon Prime packages, of course, whole 9 yards. Casco Bay ferry lines will carry them to 6 island communities out here, and they have been doing so continuously. Feel that breeze whipping across the upper deck down here, and hopefully down below as well. This cooling breeze right here, the best natural air conditioning you can get. Is one of the reasons why the coastal bay has been a tourist destination for hundreds of years. Back in the days when people were air conditioning, folks used to come up here either by a steamship or rail and enjoy a little bit of time on the Maine coast to escape. Now off to the right, we have the first scenic vista of our cruise. Look at these beautiful, majestic Portland lakes. Aren't they just breathtaking? I kid, of course. What's interesting about the area off to the right, not the tanks themselves, but instead the lake upon which they sit. This is actually all artificial fill. We built this land years after World War II to actually install some harvest shipping. Off the right-hand side used to be a home that the ship incorporated. War money ships, mainly the Venetians. These are very large vessels, about 400 feet length, said to carry everything from bullets to beans to support the war in Europe. He built 244 of them in the shipyards, which you see off the right-hand side. More about the Liberties in a moment, but I do want to point out this beautiful black hull swivel off to the left as you pass by. That That is an antique. She was built back in 1924 up in East Bay Haven, so right here on the Maine coast. Actually, famous as a racing schooner and known as Petite Rock. So the freshwater was streets of our city, but also a hazard to navigation. So we needed to mark the end of this granite breakwater, and we did that the only way we knew how, with a lighthouse. Off the right-hand side, we have the first lighthouse of our cruise. This petite white tower is officially called the 400 Harbor Breakwater, but absolutely nobody calls it the name. Things like well called this lighthouse by its nickname, which is the the 244 liberties that were built here, but more importantly, the workforce of over 33,000 largest workforce ever assembled in the state of Maine. At height of production, they could take their position in about 30 days. Now, of the 33,000 over here, 3,000 are women working right alongside the men. So we like to have rosy women right at home. Tides had to be just right to get both materials and people out here to build it. So it wasn't complete. It was kind of a port that never was. By the time it was complete, it was already obsolete. Not only was the Civil War almost over, but we were also moving away from the type of cannon that this fort was built to house. So, although she was designed for 95 cannons, she only ever saw about 36 in the caretakers' parts of the troops. Today, that is an unmaintained physical part of the city of Hannigan. So you can go out there and explore that whole fort. The only difficulty is actually getting out there. A lot of folks will either fly it, or take a private boat or a water taxi at night time. All the time that you can land up there. That's kind of fun if you do decide to go out there. Most times you're the only ones out there, so it's kind of neat to have the whole fort to yourself. 1751, this lighthouse actually used to sit isolated out here on the end of the hidden ledge. And lighthouse keeper actually used to row back and forth to work daily. Now this is a spark plug style lighthouse, or a caisson style lighthouse. Because as you can see, if you know what a spark plug looks like, lighthouse actually does kind of resemble one. Spring Point Ledge Light is also a sectored light. So if you look to the lantern gallery, you will see that there are some clear panes of glass and some red panes of glass. So depending on which direction you're approaching this lighthouse, you'll either be seeing a white flashing signal or a red flashing signal. If you're approaching it from the dangerous angle, where you may run aground on the ledge, you would be seeing the red signal. And mariners used to remember how to use one of these with the old saying, if we see white, we're all right. If we see red, we're all dead. So, kind of extreme, but it did help to get the point across. And after all, sailors' minds were frequently clouded with rum, and I can speak to that one from experience.
ఎవరనుకున్నా బీచ్ బాగుంది కదా.
Left to the right here inside, we're coming up on a nice little white sandy beach. This is Willard Beach in the city of South Portland. Willard Beach is a pretty popular spot. This is actually where a lot of Portlanders will come to swim. Well, actually they'll come to just spend some time on the sand. Over there you can see quite a few people over on the sand. And I think I count, 3 or 4 people in the water. Can you guys maybe guess why? It is cold, indeed. Waters of Willard Beach even colder than other beaches in the area, because Willard is actually subject to the Labrador Current, which comes in off the open North Atlantic, which is right off the bow. That's a great place to stay. You'll notice the first 2/3 of that tower have a little collar up there, a rough texture. That's just because it's built out of out the door, the box and stones taken up from the farms of Cape Elizabeth, brought here and pieced together by concerned masons. Everything above the column is red. There isn't a lead here, it is to our construction. The sun is such a raising the temperature is very low light. Today, that lantern will be 6 feet from sea level, which is between 74 seconds. You will see nothing. Again, for about 3,500 miles. The next closest point of land, and not directly out, but if you were to plot the course closest land, would be the southern tip of Portugal. There we go. And we have just spun around. Seas are now at our back. So that's the following seas right there. So everything will smooth right out. Now, Portland Head off the left-hand side, you may have noticed there was a large hole associated with that tower. That made it pretty much the best place to be stationed if you were a keeper. Not only were you on the mainland, but you also had that nice large house. But off to the right-hand side of the boat right now, you'll see another lighthouse. That was probably the worst place to be stationed if you were a keeper. That's probably where you would go if you had recently mouthed off to your boss. This lonely tower off to the right is Ram Island Ledge. Now, Ram Island Ledge Light, we would actually watch a wave crash over the very top of the lantern gallery. Keep in mind that that tower is 90 feet tall. And the reason I mention that is that lighthouse keepers' logs from when it was actively manned used to say that when it was struck by a large enough wave, the entire structure would ring like a bell while you were inside of it. So yeah, that's not so great. It was pretty cold in there as well, especially in the wintertime. There was one little stove, which was a kerosene stove, which you used both for heating and cooking. So you were essentially huddled around that stove in the galley, keeping watch. And you're around here for 2-week shifts at a time, typically with another keeper. So you're going to hope you really liked Steve and that he played a great game of cribbage because you could kill a lot of time with him. I say 2 weeks, but that was dependent on whether or not your relief could row out to you. Lighthouse keepers used to have to row from shore. So if seas were heavy, which they frequently were, your relief might get delayed. There was one poor guy that was stuck keeping that lonely tower for 6 weeks before he could be relieved. He likened the experience to prison. But perhaps the cherry on top of the sundae of being a keeper up here was, see that spindly little dock that extends out the left-hand side of that tower? The very end of that. That was where your outhouse used to be. So yeah, talk about a room with a view, especially in the storm. It was so difficult to keep keepers out of this lighthouse. This was one of the first in the area automated. In 1959, they actually dropped an underwater cable over from Portland Head to operate that remotely. But these days, it is fully automated with some solar panels, a bank of batteries, and a sensor that turns it on automatically at night. Now that lighthouse off the right may look like Maine's oldest, but that's actually Maine's second newest lighthouse. That wasn't built until 1905. That's what, 115, 116 years of hard living will do you. Marks a pretty dangerous ledge that it sits upon, which almost completely disappears at high tide. That ledge claimed many a ship, including, I believe it was May 20th, 1866, there were 4 documented wrecks on Ram Island Ledge. Took them all the way up until 1905 for the lighthouse up there, too. To our right, we're passing by channel marker number 12, which is a bell buoy. These red and green channel markers mark the deepest portion of the Maine shipping channel. This is where all the large oil tankers, container ships, destroyers, what have you, will have to come through it. In the Maine shipping channel, 60 feet or better of water. And that one has a bell on it as a reminder that sometimes visibility is not great out there. I can't actually say the word on the boat without the captain getting angry and not sending it, but sometimes we get a little bit of FOG, so I can't say the F word on the boat. And sometimes the best aids to navigation are actually the things you can hear. Speaks to the island's history. So today this is that private island with just the 50 summer homes, but it wasn't always private. No, this actually used to be a resort island. And that little gazebo is one of the things that remains on the grounds of the Ottawa House Resort Hotel. See, in the mid-1800s, majority of this island was purchased by a very wealthy Canadian named Lemuel Cushing. Being a pretty humble gent, first things first, Cushing decided to name the island after himself. So it was once Bangs Island, and became Cushing's Island, the name that it has to this day. And then he built the Ottawa House, said to be the height of Victorian vacation luxury. They said that things out at the Ottawa House were so posh that if you came to stay out there, your feet would never have to touch the ground. But they may want to, because the grounds of the Ottawa House were really the big draw. All the beautiful landscapes were designed by the renowned landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. Olmsted is also known for Central Park in New York City, and green spaces across the country. I spent some time here in Maine and designed the grounds of the Ottawa House, featuring beautiful walking trails, little creeks and streams, and of course those gazebos. That stone-pillared one being one of 3 that remain on the island of Olmsted's original design. Now, the Ottawa House brought a lot of tourism out to this island, but much like the city of Portland, it had a bit of an issue with fire. See, the Ottawa House burned to the ground in 1888, but it's all right. They rebuilt it. Even larger and grander the second time around. That was 5-story tall instead of 3. Had 2 massive turrets, one on either side. The structure was so massive you can actually see it from downtown Portland. But you don't see it over there anymore, because guess what? It burned down again in 1917. And at that point, there were enough private homes that had kind of grown up around the resort, but the residents just decided to keep it their own private paradise. It's been that way ever since. One beautiful private home along the greenish roof, white trim. That is the Hayes House. That was the summer cottage of Mr. Charles M. Hayes, built back in 1910. Now you can see that's a pretty palatial summer home, but Mr. Hayes could afford it. He was one of the 5 wealthiest men in the country. He was a railway tycoon, the owner of the Grand Trunk Railroad. Now he had that home built on the island in 1910, but didn't get to enjoy it for very long. Because in 1912, he was over Red Sheep. And actually, I don't know if you saw that black Chevy pickup that was kind of going right around the front of the Hayes House. That is the one vehicle on the island. That's the caretaker's truck. One vehicle on the island. Some of them do have smaller, some of the residents have golf carts to kind of get around. Golf carts are a pretty popular way of getting around some of these smaller islands. On islands with better road systems, sometimes folks will even have island vehicles, which essentially is any vehicle that won't pass Maine Sea inspection on the mainland anymore. They can get ferried out to these islands and they're able to live out their days in peace or in pieces. Because you need exactly 2 things for an island, or for a vehicle to be legal on the island: headlights and brakes. Aside from that, the rest of it can be falling apart. Excellent question. Do they have a grocery store on Cushing Island? Cushing Island is one. Some islands will have like small general stores. Cushing Island does not. Just homes. And in fact, they don't get ferry service from Casco Bay Ferry Lines because they're super private that way. In fact, if you were to land on this island with a kayak, the caretaker would be there almost instantaneously to kick you off. So instead, what they've done is they've contracted a lobster boat, the St. Croix, that runs with the Lucky Catch cruises, the ones whose ticket booths are right next to us. St. Croix will come out here to Cushing Island, I believe, 2 or 3 times a day, bringing people out there. And as far as how they get food, you will actually see, kind of where we lined up to get on Islander, you'll see a Whole Foods truck pull into the Millows parking lot and start offloading a bunch of boxes down onto the St. Croix, and food will be ferried out to the island. So that's how they get their food, that's how they get out there. So no shops, no nothing, not a single luxury. Well, the home village area stuff. Yeah, island living is definitely its own thing. Even if you live on an island with a bunch of amenities, you know, you still have to plan a little bit more ahead. You know, you can't just run to Target at 11 o'clock at night if you need a can of soup or whatever. Actually had to help a friend of mine do a roofing project. He's an islander, so of course that meant the truck from Lowe's coming down to the landing, dropping off a whole bunch of shingles at the house. So yeah, moving some shingles ended up being quite a lengthy process, and thankfully I had help. Thankfully he had help. Now off to the left-hand side, we're coming across House Island right now. So you can see this is all alone in protecting Whitehead Pass to the right. So it has its two rows of cannon points, one high and one low. Now it may look like the two halves of this fort were built into the sides of a hill. That is not quite true. House Island used to be very flat. This is actually one large structure built across the entire width of the island, and then the center section was covered in a thick layer of earthwork in order to insulate it against cannon fire so it wouldn't splinter apart when hit by large enough munitions. This fortification was named after Alexander Scammon, a Revolutionary War hero. He was the adjutant general in the Continental Army, serving directly under George Washington. He was actually originally from New Hampshire, but he did found a couple towns here in Maine, so he was kind of a Maine hero as well as a New Hampshire hero. But beloved by the folks that serve Casco Bay. 900 people call Peaks Island their year-round home, and that population will swell to about 6,000 in the summer. On busy days in the summer, ferry service comes out here 17 times a day. Now, Peaks Island, because it's so populous, it has, off the left-hand side, we have Casablanca Cruises. It's like a techno afternoon. Always nice to see the trash of Casablanca. We've got little ice cream shop downtown, a coffee shop, a little library, little satellite police, Portland Police Station, little satellite Portland Fire Department, even their own grocery store. Now this one actually doesn't just have a general store, it has a full-fledged grocery store. And off to the right-hand side, kind of toward the back building, right there, kind of with the freshly constructed door right in the middle of it. That is Hannigan's Island Market. Hannigan's is the only grocery store on Peaks Island, and they know it, because their slogan happens to be Hannigan's. If we don't have it, you don't need it. Painted proudly on the interior wall, just in case anyone tries to give them that. Peaks Island is really a great spot to, just kind of escape the mainland. It's about a 15-minute ferry ride via the Bay Lines, and it doesn't cost you very much either. $7.70 for a round-trip ferry ride out to Peaks. So easy to just escape for the day, and I will tell you what, island time is definitely a thing. Once you get out to the island, it just seems like time slows down and everything's a little bit more relaxed. Peaks Island very popular today, but this really had a very Victorian heyday. Late 1800s, early 1900s, this island was popping. You can see actually a lot of Victorian-style architecture over there, kind of speaking to the heyday. At that point, there were actually 3 steamship landings over on Peaks. They would say that, if it did well on Peaks, it would do well on Broadway. So it was kind of a pretty good for Broadway. One at Forest City
$7 for the ticket, to and fro island.
Really nice spot out here, pretty fun. Also, that side of the island was home to a little amusement park. That was called Greenwood Gardens. A nice board.
అది ప్రైవేట్ ఐలాండ్.
Off the bow. And right now we're going to be passing between, or we'll continue to have Peaks Island off to the right-hand side, but on the entirety of Peaks. But off the left, we'll pass by the Diamond Islands. First, Little Diamond Island, immediately off the left-hand side right now, and then Great Diamond Island, a little bit further up. Now, the Diamond Islands didn't always used to be called the Diamond Islands. No, instead these used to be called the Hog Islands. On the island, and also you didn't even have to build fences. The property values went way up. Little Diamond Island. Now, a little note about our tidal variation here. We have anywhere between a 9 to 12 foot difference between high and low tide. So there are a lot of things that appear and disappear with the tides. Off the left right now, you'll see kind of a bit of a sandbar or some open water. At a true high tide, so a couple feet ago, we're coming off of high tide, that is open water off the left-hand side. But you see a sandbar appearing. At low tide, that sandbar off the left will be large enough and firm enough for a vehicle to get across. A truck, in fact. One frequently does. It's a trash truck from Great Diamond Island. It'll run over at low tide, collect the trash on Little Diamond, and rush back before the tide shift. I've seen other vehicles on the sandbar, but relatively few because of something that happened back in the 90s. There was a little Jeep that was trying to make it over from Great Diamond to Little Diamond, and this was an island-only vehicle, so again, never need inspection. So about halfway across the sandbar, the transmission just went. And no matter how many times the owners tried to call AAA, they just couldn't get a tow truck out here in time. So the tides rose and carried the little Jeep away. So somewhere in the waters around us right now lies the wreck of the USS Wrangler. That story I do know is true. I used to work at AAA. Now off to the left-hand side right now, we have Great Diamond Island. And this is farm landing off the left, 2 ferry landings on Great Diamond. See a bunch of those golf carts up here, a bunch of island folks, a couple of those island-only vehicles off to the left. And a nice little mooring field here off to the left, which is actually why we cut speed. We don't want to wake. We don't want to throw a wake on those boats tied on their moorings. So all of those little white balls in the water attached to massive anchors, mushroom anchors down at the bottom. And essentially to have a boat in a mooring field, you have to have 2 boats. So you've got your big boat and then your little dinghy, skiff, or inflatable that you row from the shore out to the mooring. Tie that to the mooring, take your big boat out, and then when you want to come back in, just reverse the process. The lighthouse is not a Coast Guard maintained lighthouse. That is a privately kept lighthouse or a lawn ornament run by the people who live in that cottage. But the interesting thing about Pocahontas Light is that it sits on a navigational point. It sits on Echo Point, which is marked on all the local charts. And that lighthouse, that little lawn ornament, is pretty much always lit. So because of those 2 facts, a lot of local mariners, pleasure boaters, lobstermen have started to use that lawn ornament as a way to find their way home in the dark. Yeah. One of the reasons we really like coming out to Great Diamond Island here is to try and see some wildlife. I think confirmed that maybe some soaring osprey, fisher hawks, up in the sky. Sometimes you'll see them in the trees around here, and you'll see their nests everywhere. They essentially build on anything that sticks up out of the water. But Great Diamond Island is also home to a mated pair of bald eagles, and I think I see, do I see one above the nest? Yes, I do. Off to the left-hand side, there is an eagle's nest. There is a bald eagle. Gonna look for a little white speck. Sometimes it'll highlight. So it's immediately, essentially, off to the left-hand side of just about the front of the boat. Another great way to find it is if you see a little arrowhead-shaped rock down on the bottom. Waterline, if you go straight up from that, from my vantage point, it's pointing directly to the eagle. And that eagle is above its nest.
Bald eagle nest.
Right there, and that's a well-established nest. Those nests can actually get up to way up to a ton. This mated pair of bald eagles did not have any fledglings last year, but year before last, the last time that we ran this boat, it had 3 fledglings. So they had 3 baby eagles, all of which survived, which is actually kind of atypical. Typically they'll only have 1 or 2. That year before they had 3, so maybe they're just taking this year off to kind of recover. Well, there we are. And that eagle was not here on the last trip, so it's nice that he or she came home. Now I owe that eagle 3 herring. It's on the payroll, so every time it comes out, you know. We haven't invested in the fancy animatronic just yet, but I think that's next season.
Oh, eagle.
Sharks, excellent question. We do get sharks here. In fact, 2 deckhands that were working the day before yesterday said that they saw a fin out by Portland Headland. And I was like, was it flopping? Did it look like a sunfish? Because sunfish fins sometimes look like shark fins, but they said no, it stayed up and it was coming right toward the boat. And we've actually been this summer tracking quite a few sharks in the area. A couple weeks ago we had Freya, a sub-adult female who was kind of hanging around the waters of Cape Elizabeth and did actually come really close to the Portland Headlight. And there had been another shark about the week prior. And just last summer we had our first, kind of sad milestone, but our first shark bait out here in Casco Bay, up off of Bailey's Island, which is in the bay, just a little bit further where that power plant is, stored that power plant. So sharks are coming, and of course, you know, where there are seals, there are sharks, so we have a whole bunch of harbor seals here. So yeah, definitely becoming a concern, definitely becoming something that we're keeping our eye on, because, you know, I always think that yeah, that tracker is really handy, and you know, seeing the sharks there, but also the percentage of sharks that are actually tagged is really small compared to their total population. So in Maine, where do you start seeing the moose? That's a little bit more of a north and western Maine thing here, but I know in Gray, just about 20 miles north, kind of just a little bit more inland, there's quite a few moose there. But in order to really have like a good chance of seeing them a little bit west and a little bit north, there's one particular road where it's almost guaranteed you'll have a moose sighting. But if you want a moose that does not move, in Scarborough, right on Route 1, there is. It is not a brewery, it's actually a chocolate place. Libby's Chocolates actually made a moose out of solid chocolate. Home to about 250 folks, primarily lobstermen and fishermen over there. Long Island is kind of generationally been a lobstering community, and you know, these folks have been out here for generations because the waters around Long are really good for lobstering. And it's also famous for its annual lobster boat races. So they'll have lobster boat races out there, and because of that, they have a lot of hot rod lobster boat builders that live and work out on the island. So it's kind of an incredible well with the hard-working lobster Frenchmen over of Long Island. So they decided to secede, and they did so peacefully, but it meant that there were a few things that they had to start doing for themselves. They had to hire a couple law enforcement officers, and to set up a volunteer fire department over there, and the turnout was huge for a small island. They've got a lot of volunteer firefighters. And it also meant that they needed a fire boat. They could no longer use the Portland fire boat. So those hot rod lobster boat builders built a fire boat out of a lobster boat hull and a very impressive engine, and they put all the gear in it. And I will tell you, the Long Island lobster boat can beat the the Long Island fire boat can beat the Portland fire boat in a race any day of the week. Now, off to the left, a picturesque little cove. This is Diamond Cove on Great Diamond Island. We sometimes call this Cocktail Cove because on nice days and nice evenings in the summer, folks will typically tie on one of those mooring balls and just go ahead and tie one on. Sometimes they'll even raft up their boats, like 2 or 3 alongside and have little parties. But Diamond restaurant on the island. It's called the Diamond's Edge Restaurant, and a lovely inn, the Inn at Diamond Cove. And the interesting thing about the hotel and came from the old farming tradition of bringing livestock out to these islands. Cow Island, they'll bring school-age children out to this island in the summertime, and they'll teach them how to kayak, they'll teach them survival skills, they'll teach them about marine ecosystems. Really great summer programs for kids out on Cow Island, and the kids love it. It's nice to be out here on an island, and Ripple Effect has even built these zipline courses around the island so the kids can kind of zip around. Now, in order to raise money for this island, for weddings or lobster bakes or other events, and when I first started working here, I heard the story of a wedding that once happened on the island, and apparently Ripple Effect was able to make that happen. That story seemed a bit outlandish to me until I was telling it on a public tour, just like this one, on this boat in fact, and the guy right in the back, right where you're sitting, sir, raised his hand and he said, "That was my daughter." So I can tell you with 100% certainty, the zipline wedding did happen on Cow Island. Now met the whole family. Now, Cow Island was also home to a little military establishment. There was a little anti-aircraft gun establishment on this island called Fort Lyon, as we kind of come around the corner side. That is incredibly deep, just past these small boats here. That is called the Hussey Sound. In some places over 100 feet deep. And this was actually a very important naval anchorage for us during World War II. Before we actually got involved in the war, FDR met with Winston Churchill and in the war, because due to our position on the eastern seaboard being a little bit further north, and he was further from Europe, we're actually closer to Europe than even a defensive. We could actually stretch, and we did stretch, anti-submarine nets from island to island. So between Long and Cushing, or between Long and Petite, a reversible backstop. This rock off the bow, and I think believe Captain Pat will bring it up off the right-hand side for us. It's called halfway rock. It's half. And so I'll actually kind of let the high tide beach them on this rock. So sometimes they do the worm get up on top of the rock, and then let the tide fall and just bask in the sun there. Alright, we're going to do a little pass by halfway rock. Left-hand side first, and then the right-hand side. So off to the left, we're on a bunch of puffer seals out on the left. Keep an eye out, and there's a couple of smaller ones possibly over there. A couple in the water as well, right in front of the rock. See one guy. This is a good trick. And that seal right over there, I believe that was the one that used to be married to Heidi Klum. Did you see that nice little flip? I think you like that one.
Feel se Rania, Rutvi. Feel.
And they're up on that rock and they lift their head and their tail. That is actually called the banana pose. That guy's kind of on the side.
Rutvi, watch. Rutvi, watch. Island, feel birds.
Yes, it's kind of hard to show up the seals with the birds, but we do have a lot of birds on this rock. Off on the right-hand side, all those large blackbirds are cormorants. And of course, the seagulls on there are herring gulls. Oh, there's one of the baby seals right in the center of that rock right there, kind of tawny in color. The small ones. But the cormorants, yeah, you see them kind of spreading out their wings. They're a little bit different from other birds. Their feathers don't repel water. They actually take water on, which makes them incredible divers. And those birds are capable of diving up to 90 feet in search of a fish. So they're able to get heavier as they dive. But after a successful dive, they'll hop up there, go on like a rock or something like that, spread out their wings and dry off. That's why they're doing that. One of the things that helped kind of swap things around is off the bow and off the right-hand side. You almost, oddly enough, can't see it behind all these yachts. But there's a large white ferry with blue trim. It says DeMillo's on the side. We'll see it as we kind of pull in. Once was a car ferry. That right there is now a floating restaurant featuring 600 seats that rise and fall with the tides. Now, that is a great Portland story, a story of resilience. That right there was a brainchild of a successful restaurateur back in the 1980s named Tony DeMillo. Now, Tony had a nice restaurant in a different section of town, a nicer section of town, but he decided that he wanted a floating restaurant right down here in the heart of the old port. He figured he needed $250,000 to make his dream a reality, so he went to the bank and he asked for a loan. And the bankers said, absolutely not. Tony, are you insane? 50 letters to 250 of his closest family and friends. And he asked for $1,000 apiece. Now, for that $1,000 investment, they would receive $1,200 worth of food credit once the restaurant was complete, priority seating for the rest of their lives, and their names even on a plank on the decks of DeMillo's floating restaurant. Now, that worked. Within 30 days of sending out those letters, he had the money that he needed. He went down to Rhode Island and purchased that car ferry, brought it up here, permanently installed it at the end of Long Wharf, which back then, this wharf, where we tie up, was an old, dilapidated coal wharf. He converted the ferry into a restaurant, and the rest is history. It was and still is massively successful. But success aside, what's really important to me as a Portland resident, to the Islander, and to what we do, taking you guys out for tours, is that the success of DeMillo's Floating Restaurant really helped to catalyze a renaissance in this section of town. When DeMillo's was so successful, other people wanted to bring their restaurants and their shops and their businesses down to the old port, and it turned it into the nice place that you see today. The type of place that you guys would want to come and visit. You guys chose to come out aboard the Islander with us today. this beautiful holiday weekend. Guys, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you for the past hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to go down, help Miranda tie up the boat. If you wouldn't mind just leaving the lower left-hand side clear. We're actually going to be tying up across our slipway, so in order to get back out to Commercial Street, you're just going to have to do a little maneuver through Portland Lobster Company. So just hang tight while we tie the boat up. The next voice you hear on this microphone will be Captain Pat, letting you guys know when it's safe to depart. Thank you, guys.